When 78-year-old Elias Whitaker stepped out of his son's SUV, he expected a quick stop for gas. Instead, his 3 adult children unloaded 2 trash bags of clothes, handed his wife Nora her oxygen tank, and coldly informed them the county shelter would know what to do. 2 weeks later, their bank account drained, and their home gone. Elias and Nora used their last $900 to buy a rusted Quonset on 3 acres of forgotten Kansas land. The whole auction room laughed, but nobody knew what was buried beneath that broken metal roof, and nobody knew the Quonset had been waiting for them for 40 years. This is a story of betrayal, resilience, and a hidden truth that changed everything. To understand how Elias and Nora ended up discarded by their own flesh and blood, we have to go back to the house they once believed would keep their family together. The house on Briar Lane was never fancy. It had white siding, a sagging porch rail, and a maple tree out front that Elias planted the year their youngest daughter came home from the hospital. But to Elias and Nora, it was the center of everything. Children had grown up in that house. Birthday candles had been blown out at the kitchen table. Grandchildren had slept on the living room floor during summer storms. Nora had canned peaches in that kitchen for more than 30 years. Elias had repaired the roof twice with his own hands, even after his knees started giving him trouble. Then came the stroke. It wasn't the kind that left a person completely helpless. The doctors called it mild. Elias hated that word. There was nothing mild about waking up with one side of his mouth numb and his right hand refusing to hold a coffee mug. There was nothing mild about seeing fear in Nora's eyes while she tried to stay calm. After the hospital, their 3 children started coming around more often. Grant, the oldest, a financial planner in Wichita, came first, speaking in carefully chosen words. Beth came on weekends carrying groceries and worry in equal amounts. Their youngest, Carrie, mostly called from Topeka, always busy, always apologizing, always promising she would visit soon. At first, Elias was grateful. Then the conversations changed. Grant began talking about property taxes, medical bills, home insurance, Nora's oxygen supplies, the risk of falls, the danger of Elias driving, the burden of maintaining a house they could no longer manage. He said burden softly, as if that made it kinder. Nora would sit in her recliner with the oxygen tube under her nose, folding and unfolding the same tissue in her lap. Elias would watch her hands shake and feel something inside him shrink. They were not children. They were not furniture to be moved. They were not numbers on a spreadsheet. But the papers came anyway. Grant said it was only a power of attorney, just in case, just to help pay bills and keep things organized. Beth told them it was smart. Carrie said everyone did this when parents got older. Elias signed because he was tired. Nora signed because she trusted her children. That trust lasted less than 4 months. The house was sold before Elias fully understood what had happened. Grant said the market was good and waiting would be irresponsible. He said the proceeds had to cover debts, care planning, and outstanding expenses. He said everything had been done legally. When Elias asked to see the accounts, Grant's face tightened. "You don't need to worry about that anymore, Dad." That was the first time Elias felt truly old, not because of his weak hand, not because of the cane beside his chair, but because his own son had looked at him and decided he no longer deserved answers. The day they left Briar Lane, Nora touched the doorframe before stepping out. She did not cry in front of the children. She only looked back once at the maple tree, at the porch, at the window above the sink where she used to watch Elias come in from the yard. Their old pickup was parked behind the house, still running, but barely. Grant said they wouldn't need it where they were going. Elias asked where that was. No one answered directly. They drove them almost 40 miles before pulling into a gas station near the county line. Grant got out. Beth followed. Carrie stayed near the back of the SUV, wiping at her eyes but saying nothing. 2 trash bags came out first, then Nora's oxygen tank, then Elias's cane. Grant said the county shelter had resources. He said this was temporary. He said it was the safest option until things were settled. Nora looked at her children as if she was waiting for one of them to wake up. No one did. Scout, their old brown and white farm dog, jumped down from the SUV before Grant could stop him. He stood beside Elias, stiff-legged and trembling, but loyal as ever. Grant cursed under his breath. Elias bent slowly, one hand on Scout's head. "Leave him," Elias said. For once, Grant did. The SUV pulled away with 3 adult children inside, and 2 elderly parents standing beside a gas pump with everything they owned in plastic bags. That night, a church volunteer helped them get a room at a small motel. The next morning, Elias checked their remaining cash, $912. That was all. For 2 weeks, they lived carefully. Cheap meals, no unnecessary driving. Nora stretched her oxygen supplies, while Elias made calls that went nowhere. Legal aid had a wait list. Social services offered forms. Grant did not answer. Then Elias saw the auction notice in the Prairie Hollow weekly paper. 3 acres, 1 Quonset structure, salvage condition, minimum bid flexible. He drove out alone in the pickup, while Nora rested at the motel. Scout rode beside him, his muzzle gray, his eyes still sharp. The land sat beyond a gravel road, quiet and overgrown. The Quonset rose from the weeds like a rusted half-moon. Its metal skin was stained red-brown. One door hung crooked. The place looked forgotten, but Elias saw the concrete pad beneath it. Cracked, yes, but not ruined. He saw the curve of the steel still holding. He saw shelter, space, a chance to stand somewhere that belonged to them. At the auction, people laughed before bidding even started. Someone called it a junk Quonset. Someone else said it was only good for scrap. When Elias raised his hand, the laughter softened into pity, which somehow felt worse. Nora sat beside him with her oxygen tank between her feet. Scout lay under her chair, watching the room. The auctioneer looked surprised when Elias bid. At $500, no one challenged him. The gavel fell. Sold. Elias signed the paperwork with his left hand because his right still shook. Nora held the deed like it might blow away. Outside, a man near the steps muttered loud enough for them to hear, "That old couple lost everything, and now they bought a rust bucket." Elias did not turn around. He helped Nora into the pickup. Scout climbed in after her. Then Elias looked at the deed again and saw the previous owner's name printed near the bottom. Walter Vance. His breath caught. He had not heard that name in decades. Walter had been his father's closest friend once. Then one summer, when Elias was still young, Walter disappeared from their lives, leaving behind only whispers and unanswered questions. The Quonset was a shell, a rusted metal arch on a cracked concrete slab, but it was theirs. Elias and Nora spent the first few days simply clearing out the debris, old tools, rusted cans, and layers of dust. Scout, ever vigilant, sniffed every corner, his tail wagging only when he found a particularly interesting scent. One afternoon, while Elias was trying to pry up a stubbornly rusted floor plate near the back, his crowbar slipped, revealing not dirt, but a hollow space beneath. Curiosity piqued. He worked at it, eventually lifting a section of the concrete to reveal a small, hidden room, carefully constructed and surprisingly dry. Inside, tucked away in a waterproof metal box, were 2 things: a stack of old letters, tied with twine, and a small, heavy wooden chest. The letters were from Walter Vance. They detailed a life Elias never knew Walter had lived, a life of quiet desperation and a secret love. Walter had fallen deeply in love with a woman named Clara, a woman from a wealthy family who disapproved of their union. They had a child together, a daughter, but Clara's family had forced them apart, taking the child and sending Walter away. The letters spoke of his heartbreak, his relentless search for his daughter, and his eventual discovery that Clara had passed away, leaving their child, Lily, in the care of a distant relative. Walter had bought this land, built this hidden room, and filled it with his memories and his hope, believing one day his daughter or her descendants would find it. The wooden chest contained something even more astonishing, a series of legal documents, meticulously preserved. There was a birth certificate for Lily Vance, a will from Walter Vance establishing a trust for her, and a detailed family tree, meticulously researched, linking Lily directly to Clara's family. Most importantly, there was a DNA report, dated years ago, confirming Lily's lineage. And tucked at the very bottom, a faded photograph of a young woman with kind eyes, holding a baby. On the back, in Walter's shaky handwriting, Clara and Lily. Elias felt a tremor go through him. This wasn't just Walter's story. It was a connection to a past he never knew existed, a hidden legacy. He called Nora over, his voice hushed. As they read through the documents together, a new emotion stirred within them. Not just hope, but a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about them anymore. This was about a forgotten child, a stolen legacy, and a truth that had been buried for too long. They decided they needed help. Real help. Not the kind their children had offered. Elias remembered a name from a local paper. A lawyer known for taking on difficult cases. Marisol Reyes. He found her number and made the call, explaining their situation. The Quonset, the hidden room, the documents. Marisol listened patiently, her voice calm and professional. She agreed to meet them. The next day, Marisol arrived at the Quonset, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with an empathetic gaze. She examined the documents, her expression growing more serious with each page. "This is significant," she said, tapping the DNA report. Walter Vance was thorough. "This isn't just a claim, it's evidence." She explained that the trust Walter had established, though not enormous, was substantial enough to provide for Lily's future. The challenge would be finding Lily. As if on cue, a car pulled up the gravel road. It was Grant, accompanied by Beth and a stern-faced woman Elias didn't recognize. Grant stepped out, his usual polished demeanor replaced by a strained tension. "Dad," he began, "we need to talk. This isn't working. You don't have the resources to stay here. You don't have power, water, medical access. This isn't sustainable." Elias nodded slowly. "Then we'll make it sustainable." Grant laughed once, sharp, not amused. "With what money?" He glanced at Marisol, his eyes narrowing. "Who is this?" "My attorney," Elias stated, his voice steady. Grant's face tightened. "You bought this place with what you had left. That's what Beth told me. Last $900. Melissa," he gestured to the woman with him, "is from the county. She's here to assess your living situation." Melissa stepped forward. "Grant, we should—" "No," he cut her off. "They need to understand." He turned back to Elias. "You're out of options. That means decisions get made whether you like them or not." Scout growled low. Elias rested a hand on the dog's back, not to silence him, just to steady himself. "You already made your decisions," Elias said. "Now we're making ours." Grant's gaze drifted past him, toward the open Quonset door, toward the shadows inside. "You've been going through something," he said slowly. "I can tell." Elias didn't move. Grant took a few steps closer, peering in. "What is it? Scrap old equipment?" Elias stepped in front of the doorway. "Nothing that concerns you." That was the wrong answer. Grant's expression changed. The calculation came back, sharp, focused. "You found something," he said. Elias said nothing. Grant pushed. "If there are assets tied to this property, anything of value, it needs to be disclosed, especially if it connects to prior family holdings." Nora's head lifted slightly. "What prior holdings?" she asked. Grant hesitated just a second. Then he said, "There was talk, years ago, about land, a separate parcel, something Grandpa might have kept off record." Elias felt the ground shift under him. "You never mentioned that before. It didn't matter before, or it didn't matter to you." Grant ignored that. "If this ties into that, there could be legal implications, shared interest, family claims." Elias let out a slow breath. "There is no shared anything," he said. "Not anymore." Grant's patience snapped. "You don't get to decide that," he said. "You're not in a position to." "I am in exactly that position." The words landed hard. For the first time, Grant stepped back. Silence stretched between them. Then Melissa spoke, quieter. "Careful, Grant. We should go." He didn't look at her. He looked at Elias. "This isn't over." Elias met his eyes. "No, it's not." Grant turned and walked back to the SUV. Melissa followed quickly, relief in her steps. The engine started, tires grinding against gravel as they pulled away. The sound faded, the land went quiet again. Nora let out a breath she had been holding too long. "He knows something," she said. Elias nodded. "Not everything, but enough to be dangerous." Scout relaxed slightly, but stayed alert, watching the road long after the car disappeared. Elias turned back toward the Quonset, toward the hidden room, toward the papers that now meant more than survival. "They're not done," Nora said. "No," Elias replied, "and neither are we." She moved closer to him. "We need help, legal help, and we need to lock down whatever access they still have to our accounts." Elias's stomach tightened. "Accounts?" he repeated. Nora frowned. "What?" He walked back inside, straight to the small table they had set up. His old phone lay there, barely holding charge. He picked it up, checked the screen. One missed notification from the oxygen supply company. Account status changed. He opened it. Payment method declined. Service scheduled for suspension. Nora's voice came from behind him. "Elias?" He turned slowly. "They're still in our accounts," he said. The weight of it settled in. They had been left, but they had not been let go. And somewhere, someone was still deciding how long they were allowed to breathe. The next morning came colder than the night before. Nora woke to the quiet hiss of her oxygen tank, thinner than it should have been. The gauge had dropped more than she expected, not empty yet, but close enough to make every breath feel measured. Elias noticed it right away. He didn't say anything at first. He just checked the valve, adjusted the tubing, made sure it wasn't leaking. It wasn't. "This isn't going to last," Nora said softly. He nodded. "I know." They both stood there for a moment, listening to something they couldn't see but could feel. Time running shorter than it should. Elias grabbed his jacket. "I'm calling them." The customer service line took 20 minutes. Too long, too many recorded options. When he finally reached a real person, his voice was steady, but his hand was tight around the phone. "They canceled your automatic payment," the woman said. "We've sent notices." "To what address?" There was a pause. "The address on file. Your previous residence." Elias closed his eyes briefly. "That house is not ours anymore," he said. "We were not notified." "I understand, sir, but without a valid payment method, we can't continue service." "Someone removed it," he said, "without our consent." Another pause, then more careful. "If you believe there's been unauthorized access to your account, you'll need to file a dispute and update your billing information." "With what account?" Elias asked quietly. "The one we no longer control?" Silence. "We can give you a short extension," she said finally. 48 hours. Elias looked at Nora. 2 days. "Do it," he said. When he hung up, the air inside the Quonset felt tighter, not smaller, just heavier. "They're forcing us," Nora said. "They're trying to," Elias corrected. But the truth sat between them. They were running out of time. The knock came just after noon. Not loud, not aggressive, just firm enough to mean business. Elias opened the door halfway. A woman stood there. Mid-40s, clean jacket, clipboard. Calm eyes that had seen too many versions of this situation before. "Elias Whitaker?" she asked. "Yes. I'm Dana Price, County Social Services. I received a report about your living conditions." Marisol stepped forward, her presence immediately shifting the dynamic. "Mr. Whitaker has legal representation. Any inquiries regarding his living situation or financial affairs should be directed to me." Dana Price's eyes flickered to Marisol, then back to Elias. The clipboard remained unmoving. "I'm here to conduct a welfare check, ma'am. It's standard procedure." "And standard procedure dictates that I accompany you," Marisol countered smoothly. "You're welcome to observe, but any direct questioning of my clients will go through me." Dana's gaze lingered on Elias, then she nodded. "Understood." She stepped inside, her eyes taking in the sparse but clean interior of the Quonset. Nora, though frail, sat upright, her oxygen tank beside her. Scout watched Dana with a low, rumbling growl. Dana made a few notes on her clipboard, her questions directed to Marisol, who answered with precise, legal clarity. The visit was brief, professional, and ultimately unproductive for Dana. As she left, she paused. "We'll be in touch." "We expect you to be," Marisol replied, closing the door firmly. "They're trying to build a case for elder neglect, possibly incompetence, to regain control of your assets. Grant is behind this." Elias felt a cold dread. "But what about Lily? We need to find her." Marisol nodded. "That's our priority. I've put out feelers. With Walter Vance's will and the DNA evidence, we have a strong foundation. But we need to move quickly. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, legal filings, and a desperate search for Lily Vance. Marisol worked tirelessly, navigating the labyrinth of legal records and social services. Elias and Nora, despite their dwindling resources, clung to the hope that this hidden legacy could be their salvation, and more importantly, Lily's. Then, a breakthrough. Marisol received a call from a small-town attorney in a neighboring state. He had been contacted years ago by a young woman named Ruth, who was trying to understand her own complicated family history. Ruth had been raised by her great-aunt, who had always spoken in hushed tones about a family secret. The attorney had a file, a faded photograph, and a name, Lily Vance. A week later, Elias, Nora, and Marisol sat across a table from Ruth. She was a woman in her late 30s, with kind eyes and a quiet strength. Beside her sat a young girl, about 10 years old, with a curious gaze and a slight resemblance to the woman in Walter's photograph. This was Lily. Marisol laid out the documents: Walter Vance's letters, the birth certificate, the will, the DNA report. Ruth listened, her face a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. "My great-aunt always said there was something more," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "She said my mother was taken from her father, but she never knew why, or who he was." Marisol then presented the DNA results, confirming Lily's lineage to Walter Vance, and by extension, to Clara's family. Elias read it once, then again. There was no doubt left, and Lily was Clara's blood, which meant she was his family, not in a way anyone had chosen, not in a way anyone had prepared for, but real, documented, no longer something that could be ignored or buried. Nora reached for his hand under the table. He didn't look at her, but he held on. Across from them, Ruth sat still. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just exhaled slowly, like she had been holding something in her chest for decades and could finally let a piece of it go. "What happens now?" she asked. Marisol folded her hands. "Now we do this the right way," she said. "There's an escrow account tied to Walter Vance. It's not massive, but it's legitimate, enough to cover medical debts, stabilize housing, and create a protected fund for Lily's education and care." Ruth frowned slightly. "I don't want her turned into something she's not." "She won't be," Marisol said. "This isn't about making her rich. It's about making sure she's not left vulnerable again." Elias nodded. That mattered more than anything else. The legal process didn't fix everything overnight. Grant didn't disappear. He didn't suddenly become someone different. He faced what he had done: the misuse of power of attorney, the financial control, the decisions made without consent. There were consequences, not just legal. He had to return what could be returned, enter a restitution plan, sit in rooms where he had to listen instead of explain. He didn't argue as much anymore, but forgiveness didn't come with paperwork. Elias kept his distance, not out of anger alone, out of clarity. Beth came back differently. No long speeches, no promises she couldn't keep. She showed up. She drove Nora to her medical appointments, sat in waiting rooms without checking her phone every minute, asked questions, took notes. She helped install a proper stove in the Quonset, learned how to check the oxygen levels, stayed late when the nights got colder. She didn't ask to be forgiven. She just stayed. And over time, that meant more. The Quonset changed slowly, not into something unrecognizable, into something honest. The roof was reinforced, the walls insulated, windows added where there had only been metal before. Inside, there was a real bed, a small kitchen, a corner with books, and a desk where Lily sat most afternoons, doing her homework, with a kind of focus that didn't come from pressure, but from knowing someone was paying attention. Outside, Elias built a small garden, nothing fancy, just enough to share. Ruth came by more often, sometimes to help, sometimes just to sit. Other older neighbors started stopping by too. No one called it junk anymore, not after they saw what it held. The sign went up last. Elias took his time with it. He sanded the wood himself, painted the letters slowly, even when his hands shook more than they used to. Nora stood beside him when he finished. "What are you thinking?" she asked. He looked at the words, Clara House. Then he looked at the land, the metal curve of the Quonset, the light inside warm against the evening air. "This isn't where we were left," he said quietly. Nora smiled, soft and tired. "No," she said. "It's where we chose to stand." That night felt different. Not perfect, not free of everything that had happened, but steady. Scout lay stretched out on the small porch, half asleep, one ear still listening. Lily read one of Clara's letters out loud in a low voice, not because she had to, but because she wanted to understand the woman who came before her. Inside, Nora rested easier than she had in weeks. The oxygen line steady, her breathing calmer, not because of anything magical, but because she was no longer holding the same weight inside her chest. Elias stood at the doorway. He watched it all, the light, the voices, the quiet movement of a life that had been taken apart and was now slowly being put back together. Not the same, but real. He reached for Nora's hand when she came to stand beside him. They didn't say much. They didn't need to, because for the first time in a long time, they weren't trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. They were building something that could stay. And out on a road where people once laughed at a rusted Quonset, there was now a home that carried more than walls. It carried names that had been erased. It carried truth that had been hidden. It carried people who had been overlooked. And it gave them a place to be seen,